What's going on, everyone? So the San Antonio Spurs have been shopping Keldon Johnson very heavily this past offseason. To Keldon Johnson's credit, man, he's really been in the lab. He's lost 33 pounds. He's slimming down. He's working on his explosiveness. He's still very young, right? He's going to be 25 coming up here shortly. But this is a guy that, he can score with the best of them, right? When he's cooking and he's on, but that's kind of all he really gives you, right? You get a little tunnel vision. He can go get you a bucket, but he's kind of been relegated to that sixth man role, which is probably what his role is best as, unless you're a team that just really needs a go-to scorer. But Keldon Johnson, and I've talked about this before, Keldon Johnson is willing to kind of buy in and embrace that sixth man role. I think he has he could be in the league for a very long time as that type of role player, as that guy. I mean, look at guys like Malik Monk even, right? Just being a guy that go get you, 16 to 20 on any given night off the bench go a long way. But there is a hypothetical trade that has been kind of going around and making its rounds among Spurs fans and stuff. And that is a trade for Zach Lavine. And the proposed trade, it is this big, complex, 4-team trade, but essentially it boils down to Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, in exchange for Zach Lavine and a first. Now, a couple things about that. And of course, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions, so let me know down in the comments below about how you'd feel about this type of trade. But I want to go over the pros and I want to go over the cons for this idea. And just again, a fun conversation that I want to dive into. But you look at Zach Lavine, and on the surface, makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is a guy that will get you, 25 a night. Right? I know a lot of people are worried about his contract and his injury history. But one, last year he was supposed to finish the season. And then the Detroit rumors started. And he was like, I'm not going to Detroit. So all of a sudden he needed surgery. And even the Bulls were like, wait, what? Everyone was shocked by that. And if you look at the previous 2 years, played 67 games, 77 games, or 77 games and 67 games, right? So as long as he's playing around 65 games a season, you're good, right? Like that, you're fine. There's a reason the NBA has that 65 game rule now, because that's the average in which teams are players are playing, right? The days of guys playing 82 games just is non-existent. Very few and far between. Unless you're, like Mikal Bridges, most guys just aren't doing that in today's league, right? Especially guys that play heavy, consistent minutes. So you could argue right off the bat, okay, you're getting an upgrade of Keldon Johnson, right? So why wouldn't you do that? And if you're the Spurs, you're getting off of Collins' contract. So it's that's a win-win in that regard. Now, there is concerns and questions about kind of the center position beyond Wemby, but, you're getting a proven scorer in Zach Lavine. Now, his contract, because a lot of people look at that $43 million contract, there's two things about that. One, the salary cap is going to take a huge spike going forward. So his contract's going to get more and more digestible. It's going to be easier and easier to kind of swallow. And then also, you're in a position and lucky to where Victor Wembanyama is so cheap and is going to be cheap essentially through Zach Lavine's contract, that you can kind of take that gamble where most teams can't. It's if we get Zach Lavine, we can't fill out the rest of our roster, right? Because he's just making so much money. Well, the Spurs don't have that problem, right? And you get a proven scorer. Defensively, Zach Lavine gets a bad rep defensively, but he actually is very good defensively when he's locked in. He's not elite or anything like that, but he is actually very good because he's got the size, the athleticism, the foot speed, all the things to buy in. If Pop can kind of get him bought in and focused, then yes, he makes a ton of sense in that regard. He can make plays. He can do a little bit of everything, right? Zach Lavine is a very good talent, right? He can score with the best of them. He played 25 games last year and still gave you a 50 piece, right? The guy can score with the best of them, right? So you look at it, it's okay, Keldon Johnson, and Collins, and you're getting a first, which on that first, that I don't see. Now, there are talks about the Bulls willing to give up the 2 seconds that they got in the DeMar DeRozan trade to get off of Zach Lavine. So maybe you could get 2 seconds. Now, originally there were reports that the Bulls may give up a first, but Since then, that's basically been proven otherwise, that no, they're not gonna give up a first for Zach Lavine. So I don't see a scenario where they get a first. Now, if you can, you do that all day, in my opinion. Even if you just get an extra asset. If I'm the Spurs, it's almost worth just doing the trade just to get the first, right? Like, you're fine. Because even the expectations aren't to win right away. But, you look at kind of like Zach Lavine with Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul added to the mix. It's like, man, like, Spurs may actually be something. Spurs may actually have something. You're not counting on Zach Lavine to be your number one option, right? Because you got Victor Wembanyama. But here's where my biggest dilemma lies, and that's in Devin Vassell, right? Like, to replace Keldon Johnson for Zach Lavine, I would do that all day. That makes all the sense in the world. But you have Devin Vassell, who is your two guard, right? And could he slide over to the small forward position? Sure, right? But he's best at the two, right? He's 6'5", 200 pounds, right? Like, he's best at the two. Now, you could maybe, if you wanted to, have Zach Lavine slide over and play the three. But again, he's kind of similar. He's 6'5", 200 pounds or whatever. I think he's a little more than that off the top of my head, but basically in that area. He's like 6'5", 205, right? So he's basically another Devin Vassell. So Zach Lavine is more proven right now. Zach Lavine is also one of the best catch and shoot three-point shooters in the league, right? Like, there is an argument for that. You might even, if you wanted to, you could even kind of, if you got Zach Lavine, kind of dangle Devin Vassell and see what maybe you could get for him. But I don't think that makes sense for the Spurs, right? Because even Devin Vassell is 24, and he just turned 24 in August, right? So he is still very young. He just gave you a hair under 20 a game last season. He's only going to improve. He's only going to get better, right? Like, so to me, it's just like, is it worth basically bringing in another Devin Vassell, who, yes, is more proven and arguably better now, for a guy that may end up even being better than Zach Lavine at some point? He doesn't have the athleticism. Like, Zach Lavine has, like, the insane athleticism. But it's just Devin Vassell and Zach Lavine, it almost feels a little too conflicting. Now, there is the argument of, like, you just do it just to do it, right? Like, just, like, what are your other options there? If it works, you're going to be tough, right? Because, with Devin Vassell and Zach Lavine and their scoring abilities, right, you kind of get the new DeMar DeRozan and Zach Lavine 2.0. And Zach Lavine has shown that he can be unselfish at times. Even Devin Vassell has shown that he can be unselfish at times, right? You have Chris Paul to kind of put everything together, even defensively, right? If there are concerns about the defense, Victor Wembanyama is so good and so impactful defensively that it's not like you can get away with some things that other teams can't, right? So now you could go with like a starting five of like Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Zach Lavine, Harrison Barnes, and Victor Wembanyama, right? So now you got, basically Chris Paul, 6'5" guy, 6'5" guy, 6'8" guy as your four, and then Victor as your five. You got shooting between Devin Vassell, Chris Paul, like all five guys can shoot, right? To varying degrees, but all five guys can stretch the floor and knock down the three. And then on top of that, you have multiple guys that can put the ball on the deck and just go get a bucket, right? Devin Vassell could just go get a bucket. Zach Lavine could just go get a bucket. You still get to mold and develop Stephon Castle. I don't hate the idea. I wouldn't want to get Zach Lavine and end up almost sabotaging Devin Vassell, right? Because you're not a team that's like, if you were a scorer away, if you were like we're like a Zach Lavine away from like winning a chip or like being serious in that conversation, then sure, go do that, right? Like, it's worth it. But to me, it's just like Zach Lavine, I think, makes them better. Are they now a playoff team? Possibly. Like Zach Lavine, I think, could impact this team a lot, right? And an offseason of basically Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, and Zach Lavine in place of like Zach Collins and you know, Keldon Johnson, right? It's a pretty good return, right? It's pretty, like, you're clearly better, right? And the Spurs would be tough. Spurs would probably win a lot of games, right? But are they good enough to win a championship? I don't think so, right? But you don't have, like, the beauty of it is you don't have to give up anything, right? So you get to keep all your picks, right? You get an all-star level talent, right? A guy that has been an all-star, right? You don't have to give up a bunch of firsts and all this other stuff. He could also help Devin Vassell. It may even be kind of one of those, like, might kind of light a fire under Vassell. Of like, man, I don't want this guy. I want to be the guy. I don't want him coming in and kind of taking over, right? Like, it just, and again, if you can kind of make Vassell and Lavine work, then offensively, again, you're going to be really good, right? And now Zach Lavine is like your second or third option as opposed to like your first. And you have Victor Wembanyama, right? Like, again, if the Spurs were to do it, I don't hate it. If the Spurs did it, I'd be like, oh, okay, let's go. But it's not something that I think, like, I would rather them just kind of be patient and just see what develops, right? Like, just kind of be patient. Like, if you wanted to go get Zach Lavine because you just think, like, when he's an expiring contract, he may have more value and he raises your ceiling more now, then sure. But realistically, I think that there's just, no move is better than a bad move. And I just think Zach Lavine, not for all teams, right? Like I've talked about, I think Zach Lavine makes all the sense in the world for a team like the Lakers, but they don't really have that Devin Vassell guy, right? Like and they're not the young team. They're trying to win now, where Spurs kind of can take their time and kind of wait for the right guy. Spurs are just in a very different position, right? So to me, I look at it as like, I just think Zach Lavine would hurt, or has the potential to hurt more than just not doing anything. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass question to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like the idea of Zach Lavine on the Spurs? Do you think no, stay as far away from Zach Lavine as possible? Do you have concerns that it would hurt Devin Vassell? Again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.